Hi, and welcome to another episode of Twice as Hard. I am Janelle Benjamin, the founder and CEO of All Things Equitable. I'm here today with Kim Crowder. She's also a workplace practitioner and inclusion specialist originally from Houston, Texas, and the founder of Kim Crowder Consulting. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure, absolutely, to feature powerful, dynamic women such as yourself who've, doing this important work to address equity and inclusion in workplaces of all types and sizes. And I've invited you here particularly because I know that you've got a lot to say on this issue of our experiences working twice as hard over our careers. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience with that notion and how working twice as hard has showed up for you?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to do both. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to talk about working twice as hard, but I'm also going to talk about the advantages of being a Black woman. And I think that is so important because oftentimes we are speaking at it from one perspective. And so I want to just bring in the beauty of being a Black woman and what that means for me. So in the workplace in general, so my background is in marketing and communications. I started doing that work and always did it from a lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, justice, like words, right? And not knowing what I was doing. But I did notice that particularly, so my first job out of college, I had a Black woman as a boss. I know many people don't get to experience that, especially in their first job. And so I got to experience that. And it was such a beautiful transition into the workplace. It was very humanizing, but also she put me on game, right? Like I remember there was this one time where like I had my nails done and one of the nails had like broken off and she walked past me and she tapped my nail. She said, not in marketing. And I said, oh, I said, well, Nina, it just broke. Not in marketing. And she just kept walking. And so that was sort of what I experienced, that natural mothering and mentoring. She came to my college graduation and cried with my family. So I got sort of that. And then I moved into other spaces where that was not the case and experienced, very different sort of things where at the time I didn't know what was going on. But looking back, I'm like, oh, that was what it was. And so in that, I'll talk particularly about moving through, hitting that C-suite, being involved in the C-suite. And that is where I would say my light bulb turned on and my experiences, because I'm a Black woman, worsened. I mean, I think for lack of a better term. And in that, it wasn't just, for one, I wasn't being paid equitably. That's one. But also, in the way that I was treated, having to really sort of be questioned at every decision I was making, even though I was at the director level, even though I was brought in based on my expertise, the ways that I was being questioned. And at first I sort of thought, that's me, right? Am I doing something wrong here? And I remember my father had a conversation with me and he said, because I had an employee who was a white man who was reporting to me as my assistant, and he did not like it. He did not like that he reported to a Black woman. And when I went, I kept going back to HR and saying, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. And it was sort of like, you need to make good with him. And my dad finally said to me, why do you think that it is so important that he's comfortable over you? And it was like a light bulb came on.
Right.
And that is for me when I really started to understand how deep this is. And these were quote unquote progressive liberal women who were, like who considered themselves progressive and who were absolutely it was probably the hardest workplace that I worked in. I say all that to say, this is how it's shown up with it. It's not even twice as hard where we're talking about the work, it's the twice as hard emotional labor, mental labor. You're kind of sidestepping. If I say this or do this, what's going to happen? But I will tell you this, as a Black woman, the benefits is that I can show up to a workplace and understand the issues in a matter of a week or two, because my spidey senses have sort of been honed because of that. But also, I'm looking for ways that it not only affects those who have the background that I have, but backgrounds maybe in which I have not lived those experiences or understood, but I'm looking specifically to see what those issues could be for other groups as well. And in the way that I hire for my team, we all have backgrounds that are intersectional in some way. And so just, the beauty of being a Black woman, I have a beautiful group of Black women entrepreneurs who cheer me on and open their books and give me, here's this, here's resources, here's the information. Janice Gassam is out here writing about Black women. So there are beautiful benefits, because I always want to say that, because we hear so much about the challenges of being a Black woman, but I always want to elevate the beautiful benefits of what it means to be a Black woman. And
For
so
sure.
that is, that's kind of where I'm coming from with this. So say this as we are continuing to have excited to have this conversation from this perspective. That's one. So thank you for having me on. But also, I think this will probably be, if we talk about certain things, probably my most personal interview, because I rarely talk about myself. So we'll see what comes up.
Yeah, I get the sense, even, as you start sharing a little bit, that, there's emotion and passion in what you're sharing, and you're causing me to relate to my own experience as well. So I'm recognizing the intimacy of what you're experiencing and sharing, and how much it resonates with me all the way in Toronto, Canada. And I'm going to just show you a card that I pulled yesterday. So I got, talking about women supporting women, Brittany Janae, she has what is called Liberated love notes. So I'll show them. And I pull a card. I've got an entire box of it. Let's just do a little promo for her. I got a whole box, and I gave them out as Christmas gifts to a bunch of women that I knew in this space that are doing this work. And I've only pulled 3 cards, but the card that I pulled yesterday, I'll just read it out. It says, "I am human. My feelings are valid. I do not feel compelled to, nor will I mask or temper real and valid emotions in service of white comfort." And so there are little notes that she writes to Black women. And the fact that, you've talked about how hard it is for us to show up in predominantly white spaces, masking stifling our beauty, stifling our abilities, our Blackness, in favor of white comfort. It triggered that for me, and it's like, aha, that's exactly what we do.
And go ahead? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. And that's exactly what we need to stop doing.
I'm so glad you said it that way, because even in this work, I have to temper myself around that, because it is so ingrained in who we are as people that it shows up.
Yes.
And so there are moments where I have to sort of put guardrails on myself and pause and say, wait. Are you being as honest as you normally would? Are you being as lovingly frank as you normally would? Or are you saying something at the cost of the folks who have historically ignored backgrounds?
Right.
Or not saying, how about I say that, not saying. And so even in this work, I am still working through that. I have a great therapist where we talk about this. I also talk about this openly with other folks in this space on a regular basis, because it takes community to sort of unlearn,
for sure,
what we have considered societal norms that have been detrimental to us. And so I love that you brought that up, and I love that card said that, because that's actually something that I myself have been working through. So it truly resonates.
Yeah, I'm recognizing for myself as a practitioner in this work, who, I'm training and I'm educating, doing all the things for anti-racism and equity and inclusion. I talk a lot about white centering and decolonizing our, even our minds. But for me, it's the legacy of slavery, right? It's recognizing how detrimental that was to us in so many ways, but the things that we pass down generationally is what's coming up for me through this series, right? The notion that we need to to be different around white people, right? That's a legacy of slavery. The fact that we have to work, our labor is exploited differently, that we actually have to work twice as hard. The expectation of us is also part of that legacy. And the fact that, we do all the things, we get all the education, all the qualifications, all the credentials, and we show up in the workspace with all the expectations, and then we shrink, and then we minimize ourselves. Again, part of the legacy that we as practitioners need to undo in order to educate others and help them undo it as well. And so I guess how is it that you're currently working through that? You mentioned a therapist, but what else do you recommend for people to sort of unpack and unlearn the behaviors that are so harmful to us in the workspace?
Yeah, you just acknowledge it. I mean, there's a few things here. One is that, dealing with that, but also dealing with the honesty of the workplace. I have my own business. So I sort of get to make the rules
Right.
around here, right?
Right.
But as a practitioner, I have to honor that not everyone lives in that space. And so in that, it's a part of that is educating organizations, but it's also thinking about the consequences of what I say and what I do for other folks in that organization. And that's a hard one to sort of chew on. You want everyone to feel, I mean, we know we don't work from a safe place at work. We do not. And so there's a big piece of me that is deeply devoted to helping Black women entrepreneurs, or women entrepreneurs, particularly women of color, or women who are protected classes, providing any information I can around having something that's yours, if possible. I know that is a privilege.
Right.
So that all of your labor is not, building up another organization. But also for me, it is finding those spaces where I feel fully myself. I went on a retreat this past weekend to Mexico with some folks who are in this space. And we were just ourselves, and we were able to connect, and we joked, and we laughed, and we ate, and we were just ridiculous. Like, we did yoga twice a day. And so, finding that space, owning that space for myself is important. But I tend to think that I show up quite authentically in general. But again, I have sort of the privilege of doing that because I have my own workplace. Angela Rye just recently talked about this. She was on the Breakfast Club, where a little girl asked her at a school, how do you show up as yourself all the time? And she started to sort of cry as she was talking about it, because she says she wants to tell little Black girls to do it, but she also knows what can come with that.
Right.
And so we are sort of living on this tightrope of wanting to encourage that, but also knowing what could happen. And so just the duality of that is always something that is certainly on my mind for not only myself, but others as well. And then also honoring the fact that everyone is in their phases of what this looks like. Right. And some people are more comfortable with it, and some people aren't. And so to not project my assumptions as a Black woman on other Black women and what they should or shouldn't be doing and where they shouldn't be. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's complex, it's nuanced. And so I think for me, the biggest thing is just honoring the nuances and the complexities of all of this, and then making sure that I'm holding space for those without giving up my own sort of expansion, my own sort of presence around it.
So tell me then, Kim, and tell the viewers, the people who are watching this, those who don't necessarily understand or appreciate the complexities and the nuances, how is it when we don't have that sort of supportive mentorship or that motherly relationship? What happens when we don't necessarily get to see, Black entrepreneurs, our bosses are not Black, we're not reporting to somebody that looks like us, and what the effect is for us in the workplace?
Yeah, the mental and emotional, and here's two things I want to say. One is I never want to come at the assumption that just because someone is of the same background, that they're going to experience the workplace in the same way, that they're going to support you in the workplace. That is not always true, right? White supremacy is what it is. And so people opt into that, no matter who, anyone can opt into white supremacy.
Very true. And I've experienced that bullying and racism from, you know, other people of color directed at me, more so even than maybe sometimes white people. You know, it's
I mean,
it's in different forms.
It's in different form. Yeah. And I've experienced, you know, certain things where I'm like, yo, I thought we were on the same team, but we're not. But also I've had, for instance, I can think about a boss who was a white gay man who was totally supportive of me. And so I say that to say, it may come in different forms, but what do you do when you don't have it? That's the question. One, I would say if you have the privilege to leave a workplace, never be afraid of that option. Particularly finding space for yourself in that. But also, I would say start documenting early in a workplace when you see those things start to come up, where you're not receiving that support, where you're not being treated fairly. And when I say document, I mean document on paper, something you can take home, something that can't be erased. Either you type your notes and you save it on a hard drive and just keep those notes for yourself in case you ever need them. That's just something my dad sort of whispered to me throughout my career. But also, I don't feel like any of us should be sacrificing our self-worth and our value for a workplace. I just don't. Our lives are much bigger than the work that we do.
Right.
And it's a big part of it, but it's not the only part of us. And so as we are thinking about leaving workspaces, that we are asking the necessary questions of that next workplace, so that we can at least get a baseline for what we're going to be comfortable with. Right. Is there going to be any workspace, for the most part, that is not going to operate with some level of white supremacy in place? That's a no, because that's been societal norms, right? The way that we sort of have built workplaces. But in that, you have every right to ask the questions that you need to ask, and to find out more information and do your research of any workplace, especially as you are sort of considering what your next moves are.
Yeah. When you were in corporate, I mean, what would be some of the things that you would ask, even in an interview? What would you ask of an employer to make sure that the place that you could show up and it would be safe for you?
Yeah, I don't know that I had enough wherewithal to ask those questions when I was in corporate America, just if I'm being very straightforward. I think what I would have asked, and actually I think I have a list of questions that I can send you if you want to add them to the show notes. But things like, straight up, how's diversity, equity, and inclusion put in practice here in this workplace? Like asking, can you give me some tangibles?
Right.
What does it look like, particularly around accountability for leadership, as it relates to your company's diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism goals?
Right.
Those are just two questions off the bat that you can ask. And then whoever is going to be your direct supervisor, you can say, for you as a leader, how have you demonstrated this? And what would that look like as I come into the organization? Why can't you ask those questions? Because they're certainly going to ask every question of you. So you should feel the absolute authority and freedom to ask those questions. And if they don't like them, then you have eliminated a workplace that is not going to work for you. And that's that.
And I think that's the fear, that ingrained fear that we have, that we need that opportunity, that, we can't create our own opportunities. And that if I ask the hard questions, they aren't going to like me. They're not going to want me in their workplace. They're not going to choose me. But you're right. It's time for us to sort of own our power and change the narratives, because we are valuable and we shouldn't be working in places that don't serve us, where we have to come in and shrink and coddle to white comfort and white fragility and all that other, problematic stuff that harms us. And so tell me, I guess now, Kim, through your work at Kim Crowder Consulting. Tell me how it is that you help organizations with their workplace diversity and inclusion goals and journeys.
Yeah, we always start off with um, an assessment. That's a big piece of the beginning for us to understand the workplace as it stands, right? Who are you all? What's important to the organization? What do your leaders say about this? What do your leaders know about this? What are you already having in place around this? And so that's where we typically like to start. And then we also really I have I'm Six Sigma leadership certified. I have someone on my team who is Kata is Kata certified, and we're always thinking about processes and systems. So around what does this look like in the day to day, and where we don't focus on as a base point for change, we acknowledge that it happens certainly, but we don't necessarily wait until people are emotionally ready for the changes, until they feel 100% good about it. And I'm going to tell you why. When we look at organizations who are doing acquisitions, rarely do they feel 100% good about it, but they've weighed the risks and said this is worth doing. And so we feel like for our partners, if they've decided this is worth doing, then we move in to do it. Like that's what we do, right? If you feel like it's, you're going to spend the money, then we do it. And so that is certainly our approach around this. And particularly, we like to work with leadership because leadership is basically who is sort of leading this forward
Right.
and helping organizations understand their own history around this. Because even though they say, well, we just started talking about it. No, you've been talking about it. Maybe it wasn't with words. Maybe it wasn't with these words, but you've been talking about it. Even in the silence, you've been talking about it. And so helping organizations understand their actual input, I should say, into what has happened. How has your workplace been built? What does that look like? So that we can have really conversations that are foundational instead of conversations that are focused on symptoms. Let's have the foundational conversations around this. Okay, great. Let's acknowledge that. Now let's move forward in ways that are practical and in ways that we're not trying to flip your organization totally at first, but we may be talking, if we're looking at 10 years down the road, what does the organization look like? How does the organization need to change based on that? And how do we work backwards from there?
And what do you say to them about Black women specifically, if anything at all? Do you address, the fact that we are overqualified, we work in twice as hard, we're underrepresented, and develop specific strategies to address those, the ways that, like we spoke about, right? That we know that we're there, we're in the environments, but yet we're not speaking up, we're not speaking our truth, we are, shrinking and hiding ourselves. What do you say to them to build more inclusive workplaces?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And here's why that's an interesting question. It depends on what we find in the workplace as to the types of conversations we're having.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you why I say that. It could be if a workplace particularly is global and they are bringing in women, for instance, from India. And we notice that different women are having different experiences, then we dig in and say, is there caste systems at play here?
Right.
And I say that to say, it may not always be particularly like only Black women that we're focused on.
Right.
But particularly when I'll actually share with you a conversation that I had. I remember being, working with a workplace and the CEO called me stone-faced because I don't show a lot of emotions during the conversation. I'm just I'm taking things in, and naturally I'm kind of sort of a introvert, a logical thinker. It takes me a bit of time to process some things. I'm usually someone, in a tough conversation, let me come back to you. So I'm that person.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, I wasn't comfortable with that language, but I didn't address it in the moment.
Right.
Because there were some other things that needed to get done. And I said, I just don't have the time right now. I said that to myself.
Right.
I listened to them. And then the next day I told my assistant, I said, hey, can you go ahead and schedule a meeting with them? And I talked to them and I said, was there a reason that you felt it was important to share that thought with me?
Mm.
And, it was a bit of stumbling, right? And I was, it wasn't I was being confrontational, because there's nothing wrong with being confrontational, but I was being confrontational in a way that honored somebody else's humanity. So maybe I missed something. Let me understand something here. Let me make sure. But then I did share with them. I said, I feel like I can talk to you eye to eye because you hired me to do so. I work outside of, or partnered with me is a better word. You partnered with me to do so. Right. I work outside of the organization. But if I were a Black woman in that space and you said that to me, I would be very uncomfortable. And I would no longer trust the space.
Right.
And I might be looking for my next opportunity that very same day.
Right.
And so having to have those direct conversations, usually they pour out two ways. One, through the assessment, what we find there, but also it could pour out just in the ways that I'm treated. Yes. And sometimes I preempt those and I have a conversation with the CEO and say, hey, as a Black woman, here have been my experiences in the workplace. That may show up. And so in that, here's what this looks like around your being my co-conspirator.
Right. That's exactly the same things happened to me on a call. Again, a global client had, we're doing focus group conversations, and right as soon as we get on the call, a bunch of staff are there on my Zoom and on different screens, and a Black woman is there from one of the country offices, and a white man commented on her hair, right? She had beautiful, big, wild hair, and made a comment on it. Well, of course, I've got it's a microaggression. Everybody kind of chuckles on the line. She just lets it go. But of course, I have to go back and address it with the organizational leaders, because if that happens with the diversity and inclusion consultants on the line, what's happening when we aren't even present? And so you're right to kind of have that confrontational moment. And we are uniquely positioned to be able to call these things out where staff can't do so. And so we absolutely have to do it. So I applaud you for doing that. Absolutely. Sorry, I saw you unmute. I thought you were going to say something.
No. I was just, nope.
No, I'm saying, tell me now, I guess, what's the next thing? You're working twice as hard. We all are going really, really hard in this pandemic. Tell me what's currently on your plate at Kim Crowder Consulting. What's next for you? And how people can reach out to you if they need to get a hold.
Yeah. As an organization right now, we're building. It is always my goal to make sure that my team is taken care of, because how can I build an organization that doesn't have the same core values that we're asking, other workplaces to have? So that's probably always going to be a major place of importance for me as someone running a company. And then I would say right now we are just continuing to share and communicate what we have to be helpful out in the world. So whether that's through social media in some way, we'll be introducing some things soon where we'll be doing more conversations and some lives and moving forward in the year.
Okay, good.
So be on the lookout for that. But right now, I would say the biggest thing is to come into our circle. And what I mean by come into our circle is sign up for our newsletter. And people can do that at kimcrowderconsulting.com. That's a really great way to get resources on a regular basis, once a week, and to hear from my team and I about things that are happening currently. So for instance, we're working on one, we're hearing a lot about strategic planning. That's a big conversation right now. A lot of organizations are wrapping up strategic plans or building them right now for the new fiscal year. And so we'll be talking about around diversity, equity, inclusion. What are 3 things that you must have in your strategic plan? And so, thinking about things like that, actually, I think by the time this goes out, that it'll already be passed. But just to give you an idea of what this looks like. And so really, particularly for those in the workplaces who are considered leaders, providing resources. So that's just it. Like, keep looking out for us, and then just around the joys of Blackness. We talk about that on social media as well. We talk about the benefits of being from a historically ignored background in the workplace, or just as humans overall. One of the things that I am passionate about is making sure that we understand our value and our worth. And so, as much as I can do that to support that, is a big piece of that as well. So that's where we're headed, and hopefully, looking forward to people coming on board and coming along with us on this journey, because we are continuously learning, and we honor that as a team, right? No one has this figured out. If anybody comes to you and says we got it all figured out, I would ask them to review. We are a teaching sort of consulting organization, just like you have teaching hospitals, where we're always searching out what's the new thing, what's working, what's the data look like, what are the conversations happening. And so that's how we see ourselves. We are actively growing and living and breathing this, so that we can bring forth that knowledge and understanding into the workplace for our partners, but also out into the world.
Thank you so much, Kim, for your work. I really appreciate you and everything that you do. Everybody should definitely follow you on LinkedIn, like I do. And it's just been a real pleasure and treat to have you on, educating our audience today on the things that we do that are twice as hard for us emotionally. I think that's it's a really great contribution to the series. Please don't forget to click like and subscribe down below. And thank you again, Kim, for being a guest today. We'll see you next time on another episode of Twice as Hard.
Thanks. Thank you, Janelle.
Thank you.